Welcome back to Motivational Uplift, the podcast where we dive deep into the mind, motivation, and everything in between. I'm your host, Abhiraj, and today we're tackling something that affects us all at some point. Paranoia. Whether it's a small voice in your head whispering that people are talking about you, or a gut-wrenching feeling that the world is against you, paranoia can take many forms. But here's the million-dollar question. Is it all in your head, or is there more to it than meets the eye? Today, we're going to break down the science behind paranoia, what causes it, why it happens, and how you can manage it when it creeps into your life. And trust me, we'll go deep. I'll also be sharing real-life examples, actionable tips, and answers to some of your most common questions on the topic. So stick around. This is going to be one enlightening episode. To kick things off, let's start with a simple question. What is paranoia? Most people think paranoia only applies to extreme cases, like those conspiracy theories where someone believes the government is tracking their every move. And yes, that's a form of paranoia, but it's not the only kind. In fact, paranoia can be much more subtle. Think about this. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly felt like everyone was staring at you or whispering behind your back? Maybe you've had those moments when you were convinced yourself that someone at work or school didn't like you, even if they didn't say or do anything to show it. I know, I've been there. There was this time in school when I was 100% sure my classmates were judging my presentation. I couldn't stop thinking about it for days, analyzing every look and whisper. It consumed me, even though there was no evidence to back it up. Those are the everyday moments of paranoia. So paranoia isn't always extreme or dangerous. It can be as simple as that nagging thought that someone is secretly mad at you when there's no real proof. Paranoia in its simplest form is when our minds start creating false narratives about the intentions or actions of others, often based on fear, insecurity, or past experiences. Alright, now that we understand what paranoia is, let's dive into the science. Why do our brains do this? And why do we sometimes feel like people are out to get us even when they're not? Here's something fascinating. Paranoia can be traced back to our ancestors. Thousands of years ago, paranoia was actually a survival mechanism. Think about it. If you were living in the wild and weren't constantly on alert, you might get attacked by a predator or ambushed by an enemy tribe. In those times, being overly suspicious or cautious wasn't just normal, it was necessary. Your brain's job was to keep you alive by scanning for danger. That's why the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fear and threat detection, gets triggered when we feel paranoid. But here's the catch. In the modern world, we're not being hunted by predators and we're not living in survival mode. Yet, our brains still have this ancient survival mechanism that sometimes misfires. When we feel stressed, anxious, or insecure, our brains can mistake harmless situations for threats. So instead of a tiger lurking in the bushes, your brain might interpret someone looking at their phone while you talk to them as ignoring you. This is a classic example of the brain creating a false threat. Now let's talk about the brain's role in paranoia. As I mentioned, the amygdala is crucial. It's that tiny almond-shaped structure in your brain that lights up whenever you sense danger. But it's not working alone. Paranoia also involves the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and rational thought. In people experiencing paranoia, studies show that this part of the brain doesn't always work efficiently to calm the overactive amygdala. It's like the rational part of your brain that can't keep up with the fear response, leaving you stuck in a cycle of suspicion. And this is particularly interesting. A study from King's College, London, found that people who feel socially isolated or marginalized are more likely to experience paranoia. It makes sense, right? When you feel left out or like you don't belong, your brain might start inventing reasons for that feeling. It's like your mind is trying to explain why you're on the outside looking in, and paranoia fills in the gaps. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to answer 7 questions we've received from listeners about paranoia. Question 1. Can stress or anxiety trigger paranoia? Absolutely. Stress and anxiety are like the fuel that can ignite paranoia. When you're under stress, your brain is already on high alert, making it more likely to misinterpret situations as threats. Anxiety can also feed into paranoia because both involve worry about future events or outcomes. If you're feeling anxious, your mind might start creating worst-case scenarios, which can spiral into paranoid thoughts. Question 2. Can lack of sleep make paranoia worse? Yes, and this is such a great question because we often underestimate the role of sleep. When you're sleep deprived, your brain does not function properly. Sleep helps regulate emotions and restore cognitive function. Without enough sleep, your brain can't effectively process information, making you more likely to feel anxious or paranoid. If you've ever pulled an all-nighter and suddenly start feeling overly suspicious or sensitive, this is probably why. Question 3. Can paranoia cause physical symptoms like a racing heart or sweating? Great question. Yes, paranoia can definitely trigger physical symptoms. When you're paranoid, your body goes into a fight or flight mode, releasing adrenaline and cortisol. This can lead to a racing heart, sweating, or even shaking. Your brain perceives a threat, even if it's not real, and your body reacts as if you're in immediate danger. So the mental experience of paranoia can absolutely manifest physically. Question 4. Is paranoia the same as being cautious? This is an important distinction. Being cautious means you're aware of potential risks and taking measured steps to avoid them. Paranoia, on the other hand, involves irrational fears that are often disconnected from reality. While caution is based on reasonable concerns, paranoia can make you believe that something is a threat when there's little to no evidence for it. So paranoia is not about being careful, but rather about letting fear take control. Question 5. Can paranoia affect relationships with others? Yup. Paranoia can lead to trust issues, making you feel like others are plotting against you or have bad intentions. This can cause strain in relationships because you might misinterpret harmless actions as hostile or suspicious. Over time, it can make it hard to maintain close connections as people might feel confused or hurt by your distrust. Recognizing when paranoia is affecting your relationships is key to addressing it. Question 6. Is there a difference between paranoia and anxiety? Another good question. Paranoia and anxiety are similar, but not the same. Anxiety involves excessive worry about things that could happen, while paranoia typically involves believing that something bad is already happening, or that someone is actively trying to harm you. Anxiety is more future-focused, while paranoia is often about the perceived presence of a threat, even if it's not real. Both can feel overwhelming, but understanding the difference helps in addressing each. Question 7. Can diet or caffeine affect paranoid thoughts? Surprisingly, yes. Caffeine, for instance, can heighten anxiety and lead to jitteriness, which can exacerbate feelings of paranoia. High levels of sugar or unhealthy diets can also affect your mood and mental clarity. When your body isn't well nourished, it can make it harder to manage stress, which might increase paranoid thoughts. It's amazing how much something as simple as what you eat can impact your mind. Now that we understand what paranoia is and why it happens, let's talk about how to deal with it. It's one thing to know the science, but the real challenge is overcoming those feelings when they hit. So, how do we manage paranoia when it starts creeping into our thoughts? I've got a few science-backed strategies for you that can make a real difference. The first and most important step in dealing with paranoia is what psychologists call reality checking. This means questioning the paranoid thought the moment it arises. It sounds simple, but when you're in the grip of paranoia, your brain can make false thoughts feel incredibly real. Let's take an example. Imagine you're at a party and suddenly you feel like everyone is whispering about you. Your mind starts racing. Are they judging what I'm wearing? Did I say something embarrassing earlier? In that moment, your brain is convinced it's true. But here's the thing. Paranoia thrives on assumptions, not facts. So reality checking forces you to ask, what actual evidence do I have to support this thought? Are people really whispering, or are they just having conversations unrelated to me? The key is to identify whether your fear is based on something concrete or just a product of your mind's worst case scenario machine. Here are the questions you should ask yourself to do the reality checking technique. What evidence do you have that supported your fear? Was there any hard proof, or was your brain filling in the blanks based on anxiety? Even though they're just 3 questions, when we really examine our thoughts, we realize we're jumping to conclusions based on limited or no evidence at all. Reality checking is one of the most powerful tools in combating paranoia. It's about bringing your thoughts back to the present, grounding yourself in what's real, and not letting your brain run away with stories it's inventing. This process takes practice, but over time, it becomes a habit, helping you reduce the frequency and intensity of paranoid thoughts. Next up is grounding yourself, especially when paranoia is pulling you into a mental spiral. Have you ever noticed that when you're paranoid, your mind seems to get stuck in a loop? It keeps replaying the same fear over and over again. That's because paranoia often takes you out of the present moment. Your brain is focusing on something imagined, something that might happen or something you think is happening, but you're not actually tuned into the here and now. That's where grounding techniques come in. Grounding exercises work because they force you to reconnect with your physical surroundings. Research has shown that bringing your attention to your senses, what you see, hear, and feel, can interrupt anxious or paranoid thoughts. By doing this, you essentially distract your brain from the paranoia and anchor it back in reality. One of my favorite grounding exercises is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. This technique is really simple, but it's incredibly effective in calming the mind. Here's how it works. Start by noticing 5 things you can see around you. Really look at each one. Notice their shapes, colors, and details. Next, focus on 4 things you can physically touch. Maybe it's the chair you're sitting in, the fabric of your shirt, or the texture of your phone. Now, move on to 3 things you can hear. Pay attention to any background noises, the hum of a fan, birds outside, or even the sound of your own breathing. After that, find 2 things you can smell. This can be a bit trickier, but if you have a cup of coffee nearby, take a whiff, or notice the scent of fresh air if you're outside. Finally, focus on 1 thing you can taste. Maybe you've just had a sip of water or a snack. Even the simple act of noticing the lingering taste in your mouth can ground you in the present. Another good thing about this method is that it helps you increase your attention span, especially if you have a short one. Now, let's try this together for a moment. Wherever you are, I want you to start by noticing 5 things you can see. I'll give you a moment to look around and observe your surroundings. Now, find 4 things you can touch. Are you sitting on a soft cushion or holding something in your hands? Focus on the texture of those items. Next, listen closely and try to identify 3 distinct sounds. Maybe they're faint or distant, but take a second to really listen. Now, what can you smell? Maybe there's nothing strong, but is there a faint scent of food, fresh air, or something else in your space? Finally, focus on your sense of taste. Even if you hadn't eaten anything recently, notice if there's a lingering taste in your mouth. After completing this exercise, you should feel a little bit more connected to the present moment. Grounding is a powerful tool because it takes your mind away from the irrational fears and brings you back to what's real. You can practice this technique anywhere, when you're at work, at home, or even in the middle of a stressful situation. Now, let's talk about distraction. But not just any distraction, mindful distraction. When we think of distraction, we often imagine mindlessly scrolling through social media or binge watching Netflix. But what I'm talking about is distraction with a purpose. Here's why distraction works. When your mind is occupied with something that requires your full attention, there's less room for paranoid thoughts to take over. Mindful distraction is about engaging in activities that are both enjoyable and mentally stimulating. It could be anything from playing a musical instrument to doing a crossword puzzle or even going for a run. The key is to fully immerse yourself in the activity so that it pulls your mind away from the paranoia. For example, I've got a friend who deals with paranoid thoughts, especially when she's feeling socially anxious. Whenever she finds herself spiraling, she picks up a sketch pad and starts drawing. Drawing forces her to focus on the details, on the lines and shapes, and it pulls her away from her anxious thoughts. By the time she's finished, her mind has had time to reset, and the paranoia usually fades. Think about a hobby or activity that really engages you, something you love doing and can get lost in for a while. The next time you start feeling paranoid, try shifting your focus to that activity. Whether it's painting, baking, coding, or working out, the goal is to give your brain something else to focus on. Now, this one might surprise you, but journaling, or rather I like to call it analyzing your thoughts, is an excellent way to manage paranoia. When you write down your thoughts, it forces you to slow down and really examine what's going on in your mind. Paranoid thoughts often thrive on speed and intensity. They hit you quickly and they snowball fast. Writing them down can help slow that process. Or, better yet, completely stop it. There's actually some really interesting research to back this up. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that expressive writing, where you freely write about your thoughts and feelings, can reduce rumination and help people process their emotions. When it comes to paranoia, journaling allows you to externalize those swirling thoughts and make them less overwhelming. Once they're on paper, you can analyze them more logically. Here's how it works. Let's say you're feeling paranoid about a meeting with your boss tomorrow. Your mind is telling you that they're going to criticize your work or that you're in trouble. Grab a journal and write down exactly what you're thinking. No filter. Just pour it all out. Then, once you've got it on a page, go back and question each thought. Ask yourself, is this a fact or an assumption? Do I have a concrete reason to believe this will happen? You'll find that most of your paranoid thoughts don't hold up under scrutiny. If you haven't tried journaling and analyzing your thoughts before, I highly recommend giving it a shot. Even 5 minutes a day can make a difference in how you process your thoughts. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, connect with others. Paranoia often thrives in isolations. When we feel paranoid, our instinct is to pull back from people thinking they are the cause of our fears. But in reality, isolation can actually make paranoia worse. When we're alone, we tend to ruminate more, and our thoughts can spiral unchecked. It's in those moments of isolation that paranoia can really take root. And there's actually a psychological basis for why social connection helps reduce paranoia. Research has shown that human connection triggers the release of oxytocin, sometimes called the love hormone. Oxytocin reduces stress and increases feelings of trust and security, which directly counteracts the feelings of threat that drive paranoid thoughts. Plus, when we talk to others, we're often able to get reassurance and clarity, which can help disprove those unfounded fears. Let's say you're feeling paranoid that a friend is upset with you because they haven't texted back. Instead of letting that thought fester, you could reach out and ask them how they're doing, or make plans to hang out. More often than not, you'll realize that their delay in responding had nothing to do with you. They were just busy, and by connecting with them, you've dismantled that paranoid thought. I want to challenge you. The next time you feel like pulling back from people because you're paranoid, do the opposite. Reach out to a friend, a family member, or even a coworker. It doesn't have to be a deep conversation, just the act of connecting, whether it's grabbing a coffee, texting, or sharing a quick chat, can help break the cycle of paranoid thoughts. If you find it hard to open up when you're feeling paranoid, try starting small. You don't have to dive into the details of your fears right away. Simply being around people you trust can give you a sense of comfort and security, making it easier to let go of paranoid feelings. Remember, paranoia feeds off isolation, but connection can starve it. We are social creatures by nature, and leaning into relationships, even when we feel vulnerable, can be a powerful antidote to the grip of paranoia. You don't have to go through it alone. Before we jump into our next tip, I want to take a quick moment to talk about something I've put together just for you. This episode is sponsored by ourselves at Motivational Uplift, and I've created a special resource to help you take control of your mind when paranoia strikes. If you've been listening and thinking, I could really use a step-by-step guide to these strategies, then you're in luck. I've condensed all the practical tips from this episode into a simple, easy-to-reference PDF. Now, I know what you're thinking. Something this helpful will probably cost an arm and a leg, but no. It's actually incredibly affordable. For less than a nice Starbucks coffee, you can grab this guide at payhip.com/motivationaluplift. It's packed with everything you need to start managing paranoid thoughts effectively. No fluff, just actionable steps to help you get back in control of your mind. Why spend hours feeling overwhelmed and stuck when you can have these proven strategies right at your fingertips? Imagine how much easier life could be with clear tools to calm your mind and handle paranoia. It's available now, and the best part, it's ready for you to use immediately. So head over to payhip.com/motivationaluplift. The M in motivational and U in uplift are capital, and grab your copy today. And if you use the coupon code TAKE33, all caps, you can get 33% off. But this amazing deal doesn't last forever, and only the first 100 purchases get it, so buy it now. It's time to stop letting paranoia take control and start taking action instead. Alright, back to the podcast. Let's bring in a real story about someone I know, a close friend of mine. He had a tough time during a regular evening of homework. He was so overwhelmed with the amount of work that paranoia just took over. He genuinely believed he was never going to finish it, and that thought completely consumed him. It wasn't just a moment of stress. It turned into a full-blown panic attack. He started spiraling, convinced that he wasn't smart enough, that he didn't have what it took, and then he'd never get it done. Instead of focusing on solving the problem by working through his homework bit by bit, his mind got stuck on a loop of self-doubt. His paranoia made him think that no matter how hard he tried, he'd fail. He became mad, frustrated, and emotional. By the time he finished, it was midnight. Even after completing his homework, he didn't feel relief. He felt sad, defeated, and dumb. He said it felt like he had nothing left inside of him. This was a moment when paranoia had won. It wasn't just the homework that was a challenge, it was a belief that he couldn't handle it. That belief became the real battle, and that's what paranoia does. It tricks us into focusing on our fear of failure instead of the task at hand. If he had paused, grounded himself, or reached out for support, things could have gone differently. But in that moment, his mind got stuck on the thought of not finishing, and it took over his entire thought process, leaving him exhausted and emotionally drained. This story reminds me of how powerful our minds can be when paranoia takes hold, and why it's so important to have strategies in place to manage those moments. So, what's the key takeaway? Paranoia is a normal human experience. It's something that happens to all of us at some point, and it's often a response of stress, insecurity, or past trauma. But the key is to recognize it for what it is, a false alarm in your brain. By using strategies like reality checking, grounding exercises, and mindful distraction, you can break the cycle of paranoid thoughts and live with more clarity and peace. And remember, the next time you feel like the world is out to get you, pause, breathe, and challenge that thought. You have the power to shift your perspective. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might benefit from learning about paranoia and how to overcome it. And as always, stay motivated, stay uplifted, and I'll catch you in the next episode.